Well, I will go ahead and get us started. So, welcome to our kickoff week for the Week of Gratitude. And to start us off, we're speaking with Dr. Fernando Romero and some students. And Dr. Romero is a faculty member at Chandler-Gilbert. Teaching psychology. We do have a whole week of events, and so I'm going to go ahead and put those a little document in the chat that will share all the events. They're also all available on Coyote Connect. So without further ado, again, welcome everyone. I wanted to take some time to thank the group that put this together for our week of gratitude. I want to thank Dr. Romero and the students. I want to also thank Maria Armador, who's our student life amazing person putting all of these different events together, and also Mike Curtis and IT teams who are assisting us. So welcome everybody, and I will pass the baton to Dr. Romero.
Alisa, can I have the feature to share content? Can you enable that? And if not, okay, wow, that was fast. Wow.
Oh, Maria.
Man. Okay, so screen share. All right. So hopefully all of you can see my screen. Yes, perfect. Welcome to all of you. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the psychology of gratitude, a really basic introduction to positive psychology. This is a very informal conversation with students who sign up for courses that have positive psychology elements integrated into them. And instead of me giving a lecture about positive psychology or talking about the science of gratitude and all of that, which I had the opportunity to do for the college before, we thought, along with the Gratitude Week committee, that it would be a good idea to listen to student voices, to listen to people who have been exposed to this content, describe what it is that positive psychology can mean in their lives or can do for them in their lives. We thought that that would be a more authentic experience to have. And if you have any questions or comments, please share those in the chat. Before we get started, a quote: "Gratitude can transform common days into Thanksgiving, turn routine jobs into joy, and change ordinary opportunities into blessings." Our objective for today is to share real student experiences, perspectives, and their own personal story of growth. Before we start discussing ideas with them, if you don't have any background in positive psychology or psychology, you may be wondering about how to better understand those concepts. So, historically speaking, psychology has been the scientific study of behavior and the mind, which includes emotions as well as thoughts. But historically, we have had a tendency to focus on deficits, trauma, and what we didn't know or what we didn't understand. Positive psychology is a slightly different framework that looks at psychology more in the present, is more present and future-oriented. It focuses on strengths instead of deficits, growth instead of trauma, and instead of puzzle-oriented, is more problem-solving oriented. You may have heard about the difference between basic research and applied research. Basic research is when we conduct research for the sake of knowledge in itself, but we may not, and for the advancement of concepts, for the advancement of theory, versus applied research, where it is the type of research that aims to solve a specific problem that we're facing. So positive psychology tends to be a lot more applied, forward-looking, strength and growth based. So now I would like to introduce Amy, Aisha, and Carol. Would you like to give us a really brief introduction of who you are, what you're doing these days, when you took the class of positive psychology or lifespan development? Who would like to start?
I can start.
Thank
My
you,
name
Amy.
is Amy. My name is Amy Garrett. I am an international student from Canada living in America here with my a portion of my family. And I've been taking courses at GCC for the past year. And you know what, I just picked up this class because I always had this sense that there's just something more in depth about positivity. You start to see it in people's lives and watching how it affects different people. But honestly, when I started the class, I had no idea the psychology behind it, really, the science behind it. And so I was kind of, one of those people that thought, oh yeah, it's good to be positive. Positive is better than being negative. But I didn't understand the fullness of how it could transform your life and impact the way you live. Because the way we think transforms the way we live. The way we think changes the way we even feel. So I just thought it was it was fantastic. I took it last semester, so it's still pretty fresh in my mind, but just being able to see the content and see the scientific data behind it, and then, like Dr. Romero was saying, apply it to my life and see the results of my family and my children and my friends around me, how that impacts them personally was fascinating. So I loved it, and I'm looking forward to doing some more courses in this area.
Thank you, Amy. Carol?
Hi, my name is Carol Powell, and I took the class with Amy last semester at GCC. And it was a great class. I think I would recommend this class to everyone because I think it's life-changing. The material you learn in here can just make such a big difference in your mental and your physical health, I think. That when I started the class, I mean, I was looking at it for the science. I'm a trained yoga teacher also, and some of the mindfulness and concepts and things like that I'm familiar with, but yoga can be kind of woo-hoo sometimes, and I wanted to see if there was real science behind some of the concepts that they teach. So that was one goal for me, was to shore up the science behind concepts. But the other goal was also to make changes in my own life and just to be more positive because, just like all of humanity, I think, I have that negativity bias that we're all born with, and I can really dwell on the negative. So I wanted to just learn more strategies to become a more positive person. And I know how that's tied into health. I understand, you get into the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, and how like you can really damage yourself by spending too much time in that fight or flight mode, which is the sympathetic nervous system. So the strategies you learn in this class help you to move into that parasympathetic system where you can give your body a chance to rest and digest, like the nickname is, but also it gives your mind a chance to think better. Like when you're in that fight or flight mode, your thoughts aren't always clear, and that's biological. There are reasons for that. So if you can stay in that parasympathetic mode longer, you can be a calmer person, you can be more rational, you can be, choose to be kinder to others. There are so many benefits, but it also benefits your own body. And so the things that changed for me is, like, I was expecting this class to be a lot about mindfulness, but it's so much more. We learned just a ton of techniques in the class through through what's in the textbook, but also through an app we use, Levelhead. I don't know if Dr. Romero is still using that this semester, but I thought that was a pretty good app that gave just lots and lots of ways to use things that help you de-stress, that help you to be in the present, that help you to be kinder to others, to be grateful, and things like that. So those are some of the changes from my previous expectations.
These days, Carol, I'm using the UCLA Mindful app, which is it's a little bit more basic than Levelhead, but it's free to everyone. It's free of access, and you can have it as long as you want. So if you are listening to this presentation and you want a resource, this would be a great resource to have. It's an app that you can download for free, either through your Apple Store or Google Store. It doesn't matter. It works on iOS and Android equally well. But it's something that can guide you through understanding what are the basic principles of meditations, what are some of the most basic wellness-oriented meditations. They even link you to a podcast with faculty from UCLA. So this would be a resource that I would like to, since you mentioned it, this is what I'm using with my students this semester, and so far it's working well. Aisha.
Hello, my name is Aisha. I took Dr. Romero's developmental psychology class last year in the spring. I am a returning student, so I got my undergraduate degree 10 years ago. I became an elementary school art teacher, and the more and more I learned about theory on education, the more it became psychology, and then it became less about teaching and more just about how those little minds worked. And the more and more I learned about psychology, the more and more I realized, like, maybe my calling's clinical psychology, it's not education. So in the last few years, I've been making that switch. I came to Glendale Community College, started taking classes, started applying to schools. So that's my journey in the psychology world. When we took developmental psychology, I think Amy also mentioned, or I'm sorry, it was Amy or Carol, the Levelhead app. And I can see where those positive psychology elements came in. I remember one very specific exercise that I found very moving, and I still use to this day. I remember I was having a real bad day at work, I was sitting in the parking lot in my car, just thinking about everything that was going wrong, about how, like, I'm not doing the best that I can. Other people are doing so much better than me, all that, insecurities and all those little whispering. But I remember just sitting there, listening to the exercise, and it was about thinking about something you're grateful for in another human being. Think about someone that you love and everything that you're grateful for. And it turned my day around. I did not think that a small exercise like that could do something that powerful, but it was moving. So that's kind of my experience with positive psychology.
Thank you. There's a lot of myths.
Can I just weigh in for 1
Yes,
second,
please.
Doc? Just want
Go
to
ahead.
add on to that, Aisha. When you talk about children, I think that was something that was very fascinating for me too. And I realized, when we tap into those things, those are the things that can wake people up to a whole different experience. And when I was in Dr. Romero's class, we would see some of these videos as well that were just a little bit mind blowing. Like, it was like, what? Why did I not know this? I've raised 4 kids. And why did I not know this before? But I took some of those videos and I sent them back to some friends actually back in Canada who have been in the education system for years. Like, they taught my children in elementary school, and sent them some of this information. And the responses I got were phenomenal. I mean, they just were like, why haven't we heard of this? Why have we not? And they began to immediately apply it in their classrooms because it was so mind blowing. And yet it's so simple. It's such a simple concept. If we'll take the time to understand how the brain works and how that positivity can affect, from little ones on up, it can change so much. that I love. I love that you have both. You have the education and these little minds that you're interested in, because I just think the sooner we are able to plant that in their hearts and minds, just the greater experience they can have. And it's like exercising your brain. I think that's what also really surprised me, is that, you know, we're so in tune with having to exercise our bodies for health, but we have no idea how to exercise our brains, intentionally exercising our brains for maximum growth and capacity. And so it's just this totally different concept of realizing not only do we exercise our bodies for physical health, we can intentionally exercise our minds for greater thinking and life potential because of the way we can then think.
Yeah, this is ringing a bell because now I remember we had a discussion about like mental hygiene, right? Remember, maybe it was associated with sleep strategies, but this is coming to mind. Do you recall any of those particular videos that you share in Canada? Do you remember like what was the specific topic?
The ones that I remember sharing, I'm not sure if they were specifically in our class or they came up as we were doing a lot of the discussions.
Yeah.
The one, you know what, I would have to look for it, but it had to do with education and how we can teach children at a young age how to meditate and bring all of that emotion and into focus so that they can concentrate and so that they can absorb information and control themselves. And it talked a little bit about teaching them. It was something Aisha said, or I'm sorry, is it Aisha?
Yes.
Yes. How we can teach them, you know, like focusing on positive things. So in the classroom with little children, instead of allowing them to think negatively of the person beside them, we take that time and teach them how to slow down and meditate in a way that is practical to them. But also in that, we integrate kindness and we integrate thoughtfulness. So instead of that little child next to you who's a pain in the butt because they're all over the map and they're bugging you and they're poking you, you take time and you think about that child, and you think about what you like about that child, what you like about that little person sitting next to you. And it can change the atmosphere in the classroom entirely, because instead of focusing on the negatives and, you know, little Johnny's always poking me and bothering me, we start to think about people differently. And we can do that in an early age with children. And so it just that made me think of it when she was referring to these little minds, because I think we just have there's incredible potential if we will nurture them in the right direction to actually see each other and be kind to each other and
Yeah.
love each other in just really practical ways.
So just to give people in the audience an idea, one of the videos that I think Amy might have shared in Canada was a video about flipping the brain, where we give people the idea that you can use your hand as a model of the brain, and that sometimes when we lose control, we kind of like flip our brains. And when this happens, our psychology is no longer integrated, and it's very difficult for the emotional regions of our psychology to speak to the rational parts of our psychology. And showing little kids this basic strategy can help them realize that sometimes children, sometimes even adults, can become very irrational, but that all we need to do is regulate back and try to come back to this space where we have integrated psychology. And that's a very tangible way to speak to children, give them kind of like a mnemonic device, or even kind of like a point of reference that they can use to interpret what's going on. Um, and this actually has resulted in policy changes in many schools across the nation, fortunately. So, for example, there is a school in Baltimore that instead of putting children in detention or in timeouts, they actually create a mindfulness and meditation classroom, because they realize that sometimes when kids act up, they just need to learn how to regulate their emotions. So they would go to a place where they would actually learn to calm down and be ready for instruction. And it was a much more, so again, going back to this idea, traditional psychology is based on deficits or trauma, right? So if we discipline children in schools based on that, we need to put them in detention and we need to give them timeouts. But when you focus on present and strength and growth, then we may create the space where the child can learn to regulate emotions until the child is ready to come back to the classroom. It's a completely different way of looking at a lot of the things that we do, from parenting to teaching to marriage, right? To working with coworkers that are a pain in the neck and so on and so forth. All right. So
I
there is a
thought there were two advantages too to the
Mm,
reaching children at a young age. One is that, you know, if you can get something like this into the schools, you're probably going to reach more people than if you wait for them to become adults and decide for themselves that they want to take these classes themselves or learn about mindfulness or whichever technique you want to use. So that's one thing. And the other thing is it relates to neuroplasticity because you're getting those brains while they're young and forming, and you don't have to like do what I'm doing right now as an adult and trying to, you know, weaken those neural connections that have been made that are negative and trying to replace them with positive choices and options and things like that. So it saves them a lot of energy and effort that way, I think, too.
That's wonderful. So one of the questions was, what do you think about positive psychology before taking the class, and how have you changed your perspective? And this is related to trying to address myths that people have about positive psychology. So, or concepts like mindfulness or gratitude or meditation. Some people say, this is not for me because I just think too much. This is not for me because I'm just way too active. I'm too busy. I don't really have time for this. Um, I don't really know if I'm doing it right or wrong, or this actually conflicts with my religious beliefs, or the opposite. I don't want to be religious at all. Other people think it's too difficult, it takes too long to learn, and finally that it's a fad. So were some of these points questions that you had before coming to class, and how have you thought about them differently? Aisha, do you have any kind of apprehensions about this before you started the class, or not really?
I didn't take the positive psychology class.
In the but you did have the positive psychology elements integrated into developmental psychology.
Yes, that's true. With respect to the Level Head app, I really thought like, man, I don't have time to do this.
Right.
A 5-minute video, 3 minutes in my car, I don't have time for that. But no, it's really just, I think it's going back to what Amy said, it's an exercise and it might be hard to start at first, but the more you practice, the more it becomes like a reflex. Um, One of my misconceptions of positive psychology was kind of the toxic positivity world of live, laugh, love. You just, if someone, if you're having a hard day, just telling yourself everything's fine, it's going to be fine, trying to force a smile on your face. That doesn't actually help. It blocks your feelings, it pushes down the feelings. They're going to come back worse. But what I'm learning with positive psychology is that you can feel your feelings and you can have these uncomfortable and painful emotions. And also, you can handle them and get back to your good place. You can
Wow.
like generate positivity, which is nice.
I am so happy, Aisha, because that's one of my, as an instructor, that is kind of one of my main objectives, to dispel this series of ideas about positive psychology being just fluff or slogans or very superficial. Just be happy. Don't worry, be happy. So what do you do with a chemistry test? Don't worry, be happy. No, you have to study, right? So it's this popular version of positive psychology that exists out there in magazines and in the media that actually can create a lot of problems for people, because people can also feel hurt and insulted. Like, you mean to tell me I have depression because I'm not positive enough? You mean to tell me I got cancer because I didn't think positively? So those are some of like the corruptions of this information. And little knowledge is very dangerous. So sometimes I'm like a little apprehensive um, about providing little education, because sometimes people could get the wrong ideas.
Yeah, I think that was definitely probably one of the things for me as well. I mean, I'm a fairly positive person. I've been very fortunate in my life to be able to build on some positive experiences. But I think coming into the class, there was still a little bit of a mindset around the extreme positive people who, to what Aisha was saying as well, but also just wondering about, and I think Carol was talking about this, the science behind it. I think in the positive psychology class that we took last semester, it was just the right amount of understanding the science, reading the book Buddha's Brain and Rick Hansen, and him giving us the science behind it, but not so complicated that we, it wasn't like a super deep dive, but it was a deep enough dive into to understand that what we were talking about was not just a happy clappy feeling. It was connecting the fact that the way our brain works, the way our hormones work, the way the sympathetic nervous system works, putting those pieces together and understanding, wait a second, this is actually something that's happening to me. And it's not just up in my head. There are things that are going on, and the way I choose to perceive them and think about them can actually benefit the whole process. It was the science behind it, as well as the getting a hold of our thinking. So I just thought it was so interesting that it wasn't just this woo-woo feeling. It wasn't just trying to be more positive and trying to be happier. It was actually connecting the dots for me and realizing that this is a bigger thing that we can partake in, and it's for everyone. I think that was one of the things for me too. It can be applied to a person of faith who sees it through a certain angle, or it can be applied to a person without faith, and it can be applied in just very practical, personal, intentional ways. And I found that to be really, actually, as I applied it to my own faith journey, it enhanced my faith journey. But you didn't need it. It wouldn't have to be through a faith journey. It could be just in a wanting to live differently, wanting to perceive the world around me differently. But it was more than just a feeling. It was being able to bring those pieces together with the science behind it, and this awareness, almost like an aha moment that, like I think one of the things Rick Hansen says is that we have this ability to rewire our brains. Like, that was mind blowing to me, that I can take what, I've raised 4 children who are adults now, and each of them have different challenges, and we all do, right? We all do. But to be able to see things and realize the possibilities for people when they realize that they can be a part of rewiring their brains, and that doesn't demean anyone needing to be on a medication for a health issue or whatever. It just means that you can participate to move towards healing. It's not just something you have no control of, that you actually can participate in the rewiring of your brain to move in a different direction. Like, I just thought that was fascinating.
I think positive psychology is grounded in reality too. Like Aisha was saying about the live, laugh, love, I think you'll just burn out on that attitude because it's not realistic. I mean, the real thing is you've got problems in life, and there's some you can control and there's some you can't. And positive psychology will help you to live with the problems. It's not pretending they don't exist.
Well said. I want to open the floor for any questions that those in the audience would like to ask our students in relation to the discussion so far. So feel free to chime in. It could be comments, it could be questions. So feel free to type in the chat. All right. So in the meantime, we can continue trying to go a little bit more in depth in terms of takeaway lessons. Are there some specific principles that that resonate with you, that you've been able to integrate into your everyday life? It could also be specific strategies that you continue to use.
Were you going to say something, Amy? Okay. I was going to talk about internalizing the positive. That was one of my favorite strategies we use, is just this idea when something positive happens in your life. You know, I use a lot of nature examples. So maybe I saw a bird that I really thought was beautiful, that I would notice that and spend some time with it. But then that I would also absorb that experience, like absorb that happiness, take some time and notice how that, you know, feels to embody happiness. And that happens to that starts to like lock in those kind of feelings. It helps you to make those changes in your neural connections in your brain so that you start to utilize the happiness channels more than the negativity channels, and you look for more of those experiences. Then you know what that feels like. It feels good, so let's find more of them and look for the positive.
So to go a little bit more in depth in terms of the principle that Carol just highlighted, neuroscientists talk about this strategy HEAL, which stands for having positive experiences. Make sure that you notice them and you enrich them, because our natural tendency is to focus too much on the negative, and sometimes we don't even know that the positive things are happening in our lives. So have the positive experience, but then enhance it, absorb it into your life, and then link it with negative and experiences. And this is very difficult to do. The last component requires some training to do. But this is a concept that is very, very closely connected with gratitude, right? So one of the strategies that we teach in the class is to have a gratitude journal. I personally do it the moment I wake up in the morning. So when I wake up, before I actually get going with my day, before I actually even sit in my bed, I open my eyes, and the immediate thing for me is to be grateful for 3 things in my life. So, for example, this morning I thought about my health, my physical health. Then I thought about my son, who had a wonderful weekend experience in sports, and he was very happy to have made some progress. And then I thought about my job. I thought I was going to have the opportunity to talk to Aisha, Carol, and Amy and reconnect with them, which are fantastic students who I have wonderful, fun memories from the past. I really enjoyed teaching these classes, and I'm like, okay, today I get a chance to talk to them and catch up and even share this with other students. And that's before I even get up. So that's a way to put these principles into action and allow the positive things to become internalized. The alternative is you wake up, you turn the news, Russia this, Ukraine that, Texas this, earthquake, tsunami, and then you're like, and that's just before you even start your day. I listen to the news, but first I internalize the positive. Any strategies or key takeaway lessons from the class, Amy, Aisha?
Some strategies that I do have. I'm a really big fan of dialectical behavioral therapy. So Marsha Linehan, if you ever do any research into her and like her approach to psychology, I absolutely love how she talks about having a life worth living.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also the very basis of positive psychology. I think that all the emotions that we have is part of the human experience. And I know I've said it before, I'll say it a million times. Pain is unavoidable in life. We can't control whether or not we experience pain. And also, we don't have to suffer. So there's those both sides there. You got to feel your feelings, but you can't really appreciate happiness unless you've experienced sadness. If everybody was happy all the time, what would be the next best thing? What would be the worst thing? Happiness is never something you can just check off a list and say, I'm happy, I'm done, I can die in peace. It's something that you're always working towards, but you're more looking for balance. So when I'm looking, my key takeaway is with dialectics is it's balance. It's not about being up here. It's not about being down here. It's not black. It's not white. We're in the middle in the gray area. But overall, for practicing gratitude and positive psychology, accumulating positives is nice. Just doing one small thing, whatever it is. If it's getting Starbucks and you get that extra pump of syrup in there, go for it. It's tiny. It's like 50 cents. It'll brighten your day. Doing an effective action, like, there's a pile of dishes in your sink that's bothering you. When you're microwaving your cup of soup, do one dish. It'll take a minute, then your soup's ready, go enjoy your soup. So, and then last but not least, I like writing gratitude letters. I write a lot of gratitude letters to my sister because I don't get to see her very often. I never send them to her, but just giving yourself like that 10, 15 minutes to draft it out and really write a thoughtful letter about everything that you're grateful for that one human being that you love. You don't even have to send it. It'll turn your day around. It's not going to change any of the bad things happening, but you just kind of generated a little bit of good stuff there so you can continue with your day.
Beautiful. So to help people understand dialectics a little, this is a quick introduction to dialectics. Most phenomena in the world can be understood in terms of one perspective or a thesis, also the opposite perspective or the antithesis, and then very few things in life are actually black and white. In reality, most things are kind of like a combination of multiple influences. So that's what we call a synthesis. So in a way, you can think about emotions, let's say, for example, as emotions towards the more positive side of the spectrum, and then emotions that are more towards the negative side of the spectrum. But with the misconception of positive psychology is that you need to only pay attention to positive emotions and hide negative emotions or make them go away. But with dialectics, we understand that sometimes positive emotions can be very important in our lives because positive emotions can protect us, they can help us. And instead of trying to just reach for positive emotions, we try to find that balance that Aisha was talking about. And the word for balance in this realm is the word of equanimity, where you figure out that in your life, to have a sense of balance, you don't need to reach for highs that are too high. And because when we reach highs that are too elevated, eventually we crash and we go into lows that are very, very, that depress our mood. With equanimity, we have ups and downs, but they're not as wild. Amy?
Yeah, and I loved what Aisha was saying too, because it's, we live in a culture that is very, I think we have, in some ways here in North America, we have the luxury of being kind of fixated on comfort and ease and happiness. And we have this perspective that life is about being happy. But what I love about what she was saying is there's balance in that. Like, we don't know true joy and happiness unless we understand how to move through pain and suffering, because that's life is full of all of those emotions and all of those experiences. And when we are only expecting like a successful life has to do with happiness all the time, we'll be disappointed, we'll be disheartened, we'll feel like we're not living a great life. It's like, when you go on social media and you see everybody's best posts, like the best meal they had, the best vacation they had, the best this, everything is the best of the best that they're posting, but that's not real life. And so you just start to compare to that and feel like you're losing. And some of that is tied into having certain expectations about what life is supposed to be when it's not real, if it's not real. And so I just love what Aisha was saying about it's about embracing both. It's about understanding that having a fuller life means that we embrace all of those emotions and all of those feelings, and we find a place for them. The other thing that I really like that we talked about in the class that we took was suffering and how we deal with suffering. And we as human beings tend to suffer that we suffer. And so instead of containing suffering to something that happens, we tend to suffer and then add on to the suffering. So it's like, I remember Dr. Romero talking about this, just a basic example is like when you stub your toe, you have this initial reaction to a stub toe, but then you add things onto it like, who put that there and why did that? And we add on to the suffering so that the suffering becomes larger than life, instead of learning how to contain that suffering in that event where it happened and then let it go and move beyond that. And so that's been really challenging, for me to realize that some of these things that we feel like are out of our control are actually very within our control. We just have to change the way we perceive things often. So things will happen. That's normal. We're going to have these life experiences of suffering in our life. But if we allow it to have a life of its own and grow, then it actually takes us down another path where it's a lot more difficult to come back from. Whereas if we can put it in context and understand kind of what's happening and our tendency to myself to overreact to a situation instead of just seeing it for what it is, it's just been very challenging to think about what I'm thinking about, to stop and see the moment for what it is, or with my kids, same thing, to see the moment for what it is and to help them just to not run away with it in a negative. Because I know, as Carol was talking about earlier, we all have a negativity bias. So we all tend to focus on that negative thing. There could be 10 positive things going on, and then the one negative thing will sink our ship, and I see that with my kids a lot too, is realizing, wait a second, you just had 10 people talk about how amazingly well you did in that scenario, but you actually are going to focus on the fact that that one negative thing that happened. And I think that's in all of us. And so we can see it in other people, but the beauty is when we can see it in ourselves and stop that from kind of running away from us and contain it by paying attention to what we're thinking about.
Perfect. So resources that we would like to recommend. I think the UCLA Mindful app is a great resource. I don't know if you join before we share this particular resource. This is a free app that you can download on your cell phone, and it pretty much guides you in terms of applying some of these principles. Another resource that comes to mind is Greater Good at Berkeley. So it's greatergood.berkeley.edu. This is a fantastic site that has all kinds of articles and practices and magazines, and you can access videos and podcasts. I think Greater Good is probably the most comprehensive place that I find is appropriate, because there's a lot of stuff that you can find online that is actually not based in science. So there's a bunch of practices out there that are suggested that have zero evidence in practice. So for example, the power pose is one that comes to mind, or I'm sorry if I don't mean to make anybody upset, but like the powers of crystals, or so there's a lot of stuff out there that is not necessarily something that we have studied. Um, there is this whole idea of affirmations, that affirmations do have a place in positive psychology, but you have to understand the limitations. But sometimes the way some authors speak about affirmations in self-help books or through blogs and sites are not something that we would recommend in terms of the way we would speak about the science of positive psychology. So you have to be a little bit careful about what you read out there, because there's a lot of things that are actually just based on very little research, opinions, or somebody's use of common sense that may not have a lot of support. Okay. Other comments or questions, please write them in the chat, or feel free to speak up. Let me pause and give anybody in the audience a chance to speak, if you prefer to speak. So I'll be quiet for a few seconds and give you the chance to do that. If not, we will continue. Sounds like everybody in the audience is in a meditative state, right? All right. How have you learned to look at gratitude differently? What do you think gratitude means to you now compared to before?
As a kid, gratitude meant being grateful for objects and things. So being grateful for a roof on your head, be grateful for clothes on your back, the food you eat. But I think now I'm understanding that gratitude is a greater appreciation. It's a thankfulness, it's a mindfulness, it feels like an emotion almost, positive feeling. So there's more to it than just saying thank you. There's some kind of emotional shift in you.
I think I'm realizing too that gratitude is so much more than just being tied to happiness. That it's not just about things that we perceive to make us happy, but things that make us better. Being thankful for things that make us stronger. Being thankful for things that develop resilience in us. You know, there's just so much more to life than this simple happiness. And so being able to be thankful and have gratitude for even just difficulties, being able to move through difficulties, being able to learn from difficulties. We can have gratitude for the things that are making us better, for the things that are making us more compassionate towards other people, for the things that are making us more aware or empathetic. You know, those greater life experiences that are not just about ourselves, but about the people around us. So I think gratitude is so much deeper than what I originally thought it was. It's not just my own personal thankfulness, but it's something that shifts me. It moves me kind of away from myself and to perceive the world around me and to see other people. You know, that we're all a part of this human experience, and the best human experience is one that is lived beyond ourselves.
I think that gratitude is everywhere. Like you can just find things anywhere you look if you're looking for gratitude. And when you start to see the world that way, it makes you a happier person by default. And also what Amy was saying that um, you start to see people differently. You start to find your shared humanity. And I actually think that this is kind of like, I don't know if it's an overt goal of positive psychology per se, but I think it's kind of the result of positive psychology, at least, that that you start to see other people differently, and that it actually can make the world a better place to live. As far as gratitude goes, this is something I'm working on too, like just to find more ways, because I think I would come to it with a very basic, like, I'm grateful for these people or these things I have in my life. So I'm always looking for new ways to to dig deeper. And I don't know if I can show a book. I found a book. This book is just filled with lists. Let me see, it's just filled with lists. It's called Little Pieces of Hope, Happy Making Things in a Difficult World. And this guy, the author is Todd Dowdy, Dought. He just has like list after list of things he's grateful for. And I'm just like, some of these things I'm just like, wow, I don't think, yeah, I don't think of these kinds of things. So it's helping me to like dig deeper and see even more people and places and things and feelings in the world that I can be grateful for.
Wow, love it. Happy making things in a difficult world.
You know, like he might say, let's see, healthcare professionals, Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga's duets album, Cheek to Cheek, the potential of a blank page, metaphorically or literally. He just has these things, the optimism of a kindergartner, just all these things he can see in the world. And I'm like, that's great. That's just great to be able to look at. And it may not apply to you, but you might have something similar you'd replace that item on his list with. So,
Wow. That's another resource for those of you who are asking for resources. Yeah, I do think it's amazing that um, that we now have scientific ways to understand some things that used to be left only to a more philosophical or even spiritual realm. To be social is to be integrated in a community. To be pro-social is to be integrated into a community in ways that you're actively helping the other, right? And we know that our psychology, the type of psychology that is activated when you have when you are practicing positive psychology is absolutely pro-social. So let me give you a couple of concepts that I teach in my classes. This functional psychology happens when we are very close, very subjective, and very judgmental. So anytime you enter any type of interaction at work, with your children, with your parents, with your boyfriend, and your psychology looks like this, things are going to go really badly. And you're going to break the social ties and you're going to feel isolated. And in addition to that, instead of helping the other, you have a tendency to hurt the other. So that's antisocial. To be antisocial is to hurt people. When we activate positive psychology, our mindset is open, objective, and observing. Those are the key three characteristics of acting in a way that you actually manifest positive psychology. So if you have a conflict, if you have a difficult conversation that you're going to have with someone, and your psychology looks like this, the outcome is going to be terrible. But if instead you approach that difficult situation with this mindset, you may actually solve the problem. You may build connections. You may help another person. So this is kind of like what positive psychology really looks like as opposed to just think positively, just smile. Like Annie, you're never fully dressed without a smile. That's not positive psychology. I wish I had my Annie wig today. I forgot it at home. All right. So we only have 3 minutes left. Alyssa, do you have any announcements that you need to make?
I will go ahead and put in the chat the document for the rest of this week's events. So there's a couple of workshops on writing with gratitude. There's service through gratitude. You can either be donating items for Jose's Closet, which is an organization that works with foster families, and they're building a food pantry, or going to Jose's Closet later this week on Thursday. So yeah, thank you all for attending. And if anyone has any more last minute questions, please unmute or put them in the chat. And thank you, students, for sharing. This has been wonderful. It's always great to hear students' perspectives and takeaways from classes, and the tools, the mental tools that you're learning beyond just knowledge.
So I want everybody in the audience, Aubrey, Debbie, Eric, Catherine, Lorena, Carol, Marisa, Renee, Rachel, Lizzie, Olivia. I want you to have the chance to express gratitude for these wonderful students that you heard today. Catherine, Eric, Debbie, everybody. Can you please write in the chat a statement that shows gratitude towards the students that took out time from their busy schedule to be here and share those wonderful insights and experiences. So please practice gratitude and put this into action by sharing those ideas in the chat. Or if you can unmute yourself, even better. Are people allowed to write anything in the chat? Because I don't see anything.
I'm having trouble writing in the chat. I don't,
So
but I've been
maybe
having
that was our problem.
technical
Ah,
difficulties.
Me
But,
too. I can't do anything because it won't allow me to select a participant or enter a chat or anything.
I'm so sorry. Okay. So there was no wonder because
I'm
usually
not sure.
students,
I know WebEx had changed, but I wasn't aware of the chat setting changes. Maybe
it's,
people want to unmute.
yeah, please unmute because
Or if people wanted to be putting them in and directing them towards like myself or Dr. Romero, we'll try to like copy and paste and put it in as hosts. I think we might have access. Or at least I know I have access to the chat.
yeah. So no wonder people were so passive. Sorry. Okay, beautiful. Okay. So I don't want to take more of your time. Thank you so much, Aisha, Amy, and Carol. You guys were wonderful. This was above and beyond any expectations that I could have. I think it was a lot better than me talking to students because this shows that this is actually something that can be understood and that it can make a big difference in your life. I'm starting to see smiles and all of that that warms my heart. Really appreciate your participation. I can stick around if anybody has questions or anything like that. If you need to go, please log out and carry on with your wonderful lives. It's been a pleasure. See you next time. Thank you,
Dr.
Aisha.
Romero.
Thank you, Amy.
You.
Carol.